At my 45th birthday party, my husband Garrett slapped me across the face in front of 30 guests because I asked him to help me carry the cake from the kitchen. That moment of public humiliation became the catalyst that transformed me from a people-pleasing housewife into a successful business owner worth $500,000. He thought he was reminding me of my place. Instead, he accidentally set me free. Before we dive back in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if this story hit home, hit that subscribe button. I've got something really special lined up for tomorrow. My name is Rosalind Pemberton, and for 22 years, I lived in the shadow of my husband's expectations in our pristine home in Willowbrook Heights. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5:30 a.m. to prepare Garrett's breakfast exactly how he liked it. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast cut diagonally, coffee black with exactly 1 sugar cube. Not a packet of sugar, not a teaspoon, a cube. I'd learned early in our marriage that precision mattered to Garrett more than affection. He was the kind of man who noticed when the throw pillows on our beige sectional were arranged differently, who could tell if I'd used the wrong brand of fabric softener, who kept a mental inventory of how I spent every dollar of our household budget. Rosalind handles all the domestic affairs, he'd tell his colleagues at the accounting firm where he worked as a senior partner. Keeps everything running smoothly so I can focus on the important things. The way he said it always made me feel like I was his personal assistant rather than his wife. Our friends in Willowbrook Heights saw us as the perfect couple. Garrett, tall, distinguished, with salt and pepper hair and expensive suits. Me, quiet, agreeable, always hosting dinner parties and organizing charity fundraisers for the local hospital. What they didn't see were the small cruelties behind closed doors. The eye rolls when I spoke too long, the dismissive chuckles when I shared an opinion, the way he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to correct something trivial. For years, I told myself this was normal. This was marriage. This was what successful couples looked like in neighborhoods like ours, where manicured lawns and luxury cars were the currency of respect. 3 weeks before my 45th birthday, something shifted. I was scrolling through social media when I came across a post from my old college roommate, Penelope Hartwell. She just launched her own interior design consultancy in Maplewood, 2 towns over. The photos showed her in a chic office space, surrounded by fabric samples and design boards, beaming with pride. 5 years ago, I was just another suburban mom feeling invisible. Today, I'm booked solid with clients who value my creative vision. It's never too late to rediscover who you're meant to be. I stared at that post for 20 minutes. Penelope and I had been design majors together at Riverside University. We'd spent countless nights dreaming about opening our own firm, creating beautiful spaces that told stories. I'd been just as talented, just as passionate. But after marrying Garrett right after graduation, those dreams got packed away like seasonal decorations, stored somewhere I couldn't quite remember. That evening at dinner, I brought up the post. Do you remember how I used to love interior design? I was thinking maybe I could... Rosalind, sweetheart, he interrupted, not looking up from his salmon. You have a beautiful home to design right here. Isn't that enough creative outlet for you? He gestured around our dining room with its neutral walls and safe, boring furniture. Besides, we don't need the extra income, and I'd prefer you available for my work events. The dismissal stung, but I tried once more. It's not about money, Garrett. It's about having something that's mine, something I built. This time, he did look up, with that patronizing smile I'd grown to dread. Honey, you built this. He waved his hand around the room again. You built our life together. That's more valuable than any little business venture. Little business venture. The words echoed in my head as I cleared the dishes. As my birthday approached, I found myself growing restless. Maybe it was turning 45, or maybe it was Penelope's post. But something was stirring inside me that I couldn't quiet. I decided to plan my own birthday party for the first time in years. Usually, Garrett just made dinner reservations for the two of us. I'd like to invite some friends over for my birthday, I told him one morning as he read the financial section of the Willowbrook Tribune. Maybe 30 people or so. I could cater some appetizers, get a nice cake. Fine, he said without looking up. Just keep it tasteful. I'll invite the Hendersons and the Blackstones from the firm. Of course he would. Even my birthday party would become a networking opportunity for him. But as I planned the gathering, I found myself getting genuinely excited. I invited old friends I hadn't seen in years, including Penelope. I ordered a beautiful cake from Celestine's Bakery downtown, chocolate layers with raspberry filling and buttercream roses. I chose my favorite wine instead of Garrett's usual selections. For the first time in years, I was making choices based purely on what I wanted.
2 days before the party, I made a decision that surprised even me. I went to the mall and bought a dress, not the conservative navy or black numbers that filled my closet, but a deep emerald green wrap dress that made my eyes sparkle and showed I actually had a figure under all those shapeless clothes. When Garrett saw me trying it on at home, his reaction was immediate. That's a bit much for a house party, don't you think? You look like you're trying too hard. But for once, I didn't rush to change. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman I'd forgotten existed. I think I look beautiful, I said quietly. He snorted. If you say so. The morning of my birthday, I woke up with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I spent the day preparing, arranging flowers, setting out appetizers, chilling wine. The house looked magazine perfect. But more than that, it felt alive with possibility. Garrett spent the morning at the office, even though it was Saturday. Emergency client meeting, he'd said, though I noticed he'd been having a lot of those lately. When our guests began arriving at 6 p.m., I felt radiant in my green dress. Penelope was among the first to arrive, and her hug was warm and genuine. "Rosalind, you look absolutely stunning. That color is perfect on you." As more friends arrived, I found myself laughing more freely than I had in months. I was in my element. A gracious hostess, engaged conversationalist, the woman I used to be before I'd learned to make myself smaller. Garrett arrived fashionably late, still in his work clothes, immediately gravitating toward his colleagues. I watched him from across the room, and for the first time I noticed how little he seemed to actually enjoy these social situations unless he was talking business. When it came time for cake, I was in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on the presentation. 45 elegant candles, the raspberry filling peeking through the layers just so. It was heavier than I anticipated, and I wanted it to look perfect when I carried it out. I peeked into the living room where our guests were mingling. "Garrett," I called out sweetly, "could you help me carry the cake? It's a bit heavy." The room fell silent. Every conversation stopped. 30 pairs of eyes turned first to me, then to Garrett, waiting. What happened next would change everything. This one took us ages to get right, so if you're loving it, hitting subscribe would honestly mean the world to us. Okay, back to business. Garrett's face hardened as he looked at me standing in the kitchen doorway with flour still dusting my emerald dress. "I'm talking to Mr. Henderson about the Morrison account," he said coldly. "Can't you manage a simple cake by yourself?" A nervous laugh rippled through our guests. I felt my cheeks burn, but I tried to keep my voice light. "It's just that it's quite heavy, and I thought—" "You thought wrong." His voice cut through the room like ice. "I don't carry cakes, Rosalind. That's your department." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes watching this humiliating exchange unfold. Penelope shifted uncomfortably near the window. Mrs. Blackstone suddenly became very interested in her wine glass. But something inside me refused to shrink back into the kitchen. Maybe it was the green dress giving me courage, or maybe it was seeing Penelope earlier, vibrant, confident, owning her space. Whatever it was, I found myself speaking words I'd never said before. Garrett, it's my birthday party. I'm not asking you to cook the cake, just help me carry it, like a husband would. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Garrett's jaw clenched, and I watched his hands ball into fists at his sides. For 22 years, I'd learned to read those danger signs and retreat. This time, I stood my ground. Like a husband would, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Let me tell you what a husband does, Rosalind. A husband works 60-hour weeks to pay for this house, these parties, that dress you're wearing. A husband doesn't play servant at his wife's little social gatherings. The word little hit me like a physical blow. Everything was always little to Garrett. My interests, my feelings, my dreams. I felt 22 years of suppressed anger rising in my chest. This isn't anything little, I said, my voice stronger now. These are our friends. This is my birthday, and I'm asking my husband, my partner, to help me with something that matters to me. That's when Garrett stood up from the leather armchair where he'd been holding court with his colleagues. The room seemed to shrink as he walked towards me, each step deliberate and threatening. I'd seen this storm building in his eyes before, but never in public, never with witnesses. You want to embarrass me in front of my colleagues, he hissed when he reached me. You want to make me look like some kind of servant? I want you to act like you care about me, I whispered back, but loud enough for others to hear. The slap came so fast I barely saw it coming. His palm connected with my left cheek with a crack that echoed through our living room like a gunshot. The force of it knocked me sideways, and I had to grab the doorframe to keep from falling.
The room erupted. Several women gasped. I heard Penelope say, "Oh my God, Garrett!" Mr. Henderson stood up so quickly his whiskey glass fell to the floor. But I barely heard any of it. In that moment, as my cheek throbbed and my ears rang, something crystallized inside me with perfect, terrifying clarity. This was it. This was the moment I'd been unconsciously building toward for years, maybe my whole adult life. I straightened up slowly, touched my burning cheek, and looked directly at Garrett. His face was flushed with anger and something else, maybe shock at what he'd just done in front of witnesses. For a split second, I saw fear in his eyes. "Get out," I said quietly. "Rosalind, get out!" The words exploded from somewhere deep inside me, a place I didn't even know existed. Get out of my house, get out of my party, get out of my life. Garrett looked around the room at 30 horrified faces staring back at him. His colleagues from the firm looked mortified. Mrs. Blackstone had tears in her eyes. Even the caterer, who'd been quietly arranging appetizers in the corner, had stopped working to stare. "Rosalind, you're being dramatic," he said, trying to regain control, but his voice wavered. "Everyone knows you can be emotional. Let's just—" "The only thing everyone knows now," I interrupted, my voice ringing with authority I'd never heard from myself before, "is that you're a man who hits women, in public, at his wife's birthday party." I turned to address our guests, most of whom looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this, but I'm glad you did. I want everyone to see exactly who Garrett Pemberton really is." Penelope stepped forward first. "Rosalind, do you want me to call the police?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Garrett's face went white. I could see him calculating his reputation, his job at the firm, what his colleagues would think, what his clients would think. I looked at him for a long moment, this man I'd spent over half my adult life trying to please, and felt something I'd never felt before, complete indifference. "No," I said finally, "I just want him gone." Garrett opened his mouth to argue, but Mr. Henderson cleared his throat pointedly. "Perhaps you should leave, Garrett. Give Rosalind some space." Even his own colleagues were turning against him. I watched recognition dawn on Garrett's face. He'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross, done damage he couldn't undo, not just to me, but to himself. "This isn't over," he muttered as he grabbed his keys from the side table. I walked to the front door and held it open. "Yes, it is."
After he left, the silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then Penelope was beside me, gently touching my shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked around the room at these people, some friends, some acquaintances, some strangers, who just witnessed the most embarrassing moment of my life. And I realized something unexpected. I wasn't embarrassed at all. I was free. "You know what?" I said, and I was surprised to find myself almost smiling. "I think I am. For the first time in 22 years, I think I really am okay." Mrs. Blackstone stepped forward tentatively. Should we leave? Give you some privacy?" I looked at the beautiful cake still sitting in the kitchen, at the wine I'd chosen so carefully, at these people who'd just seen me stand up for myself in a way I'd never done before. "Actually," I said, and this time I did smile, "I think we should cut the cake. It's still my birthday, and I'll be damned if I let him ruin that too." The next morning, I woke up in my guest bedroom with a splitting headache and the strange sensation that everything in my world had shifted overnight. The left side of my face was tender to the touch, the purple bruise blooming across my cheekbone like some grotesque flower. I'd locked myself in the guest room after the party ended, partly because I wasn't sure if Garrett would come back, and partly because sleeping in our marital bed felt impossible. The room smelled like the lavender sachets I'd placed in the closet years ago, a small comfort in what felt like an alien landscape of my own home. My phone buzzed constantly on the nightstand. 17 missed calls from Garrett, 12 text messages ranging from angry to pleading to threatening. I deleted them all without reading most of them. There were also messages from several party guests. Penelope had texted 3 times checking on me, and even Mrs. Blackstone had reached out with offers of help. The practical realities of my situation began sinking in as I sat on the edge of the guest bed, still wearing my emerald dress from the night before. I had no job, no independent income, no credit cards in my own name. Our bank accounts were joint, but Garrett controlled them. The house, the cars, even my jewelry. Legally, I wasn't sure what belonged to me. 22 years of financial dependence stretched before me like a chasm I didn't know how to cross.
Around noon, I heard Garrett's BMW pull into the driveway. My stomach clenched as his key turned in the front door. For a moment, I considered staying locked in the guest room, but something had fundamentally changed in me since last night. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I found him in the kitchen, making coffee like nothing had happened. He looked rumpled, like he'd slept in his car or maybe at the office. When he saw me, his expression flickered between guilt and defiance. "Your face looks terrible," he said, which I supposed was his version of an apology. "It feels terrible too," I replied evenly. He poured himself coffee and didn't offer me any, a small cruelty that once would have stung but now just seemed pathetic. "Look, Rosalind, things got heated last night. You were being difficult in front of important people, and I reacted poorly. But we can move past this." I stared at him, this man I'd shared a bed with for over 22 years, and felt like I was seeing him clearly for the first time. "Move past this, Garrett? You hit me, in public, in front of 30 people. You embarrassed me first," he shot back, then seemed to catch himself. "What I mean is, we both made mistakes. The important thing now is damage control. I've already spoken to Henderson and Blackstone this morning." "Damage control?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Is that what I am to you? Damage to be controlled?" He set his coffee mug down hard enough that it sloshed onto the granite countertop I'd chosen so carefully 5 years ago. "Don't be melodramatic, Rosalind. You're my wife. We have a life together, obligations, a reputation in this community. One bad evening doesn't erase 22 years of marriage." I walked to the window overlooking our backyard where the automatic sprinkler system was watering the lawn we paid a service to maintain. Everything about our life was automatic, maintained by other people, carefully controlled to project the right image. "What if I don't want those 22 years anymore?" I asked quietly. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. When I turned around,
Garrett's face had gone pale. "You don't mean that. You're upset, which is understandable, but you're not thinking clearly. Where would you go? What would you do? You haven't worked in decades, Rosalind. You have no skills, no experience in the real world." Each word was carefully chosen to wound, to remind me of my dependence, my limitations. A week ago, they might have worked, but something had broken loose in me when his hand connected with my face, and I couldn't seem to find my way back to being afraid. "Maybe I'll figure it out as I go," I said. That afternoon, after Garrett left for what he claimed was an emergency meeting at the firm, though I suspected he just couldn't stand being in the house with me, I called Penelope. "Honey, I've been worried sick about you. How are you holding up?" "I think I'm leaving him," I said, and hearing the words out loud made them feel more real. "Good," she said without hesitation. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" I looked around our perfect living room with its neutral colors and expensive furniture that somehow managed to feel completely soulless. "I'm not sure. I haven't thought that far ahead." "Come stay with me," Penelope said immediately. "I have a guest room in my apartment above the design studio. It's small, but it's yours for as long as you need it." The offer brought tears to my eyes. "Penelope, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. Pack a bag and come over. We'll figure out the rest later." An hour later, I stood in my walk-in closet staring at 22 years of carefully curated clothes, all in safe colors, all chosen with Garrett's approval in mind. The emerald dress hung wrinkled on the chair where I'd left it, and I found myself packing it first, like a talisman. I filled one suitcase with essentials and left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to think. Don't call me. I'll contact you when I'm ready." Penelope's apartment was everything my house wasn't. Warm, cluttered with creative projects, full of personality. She hugged me tightly when I arrived, and I realized it had been months since anyone had touched me with genuine affection. "The guest room is through here." She led me down a hallway lined with her design sketches. "It's not fancy." "But it's perfect," I interrupted, and I meant it. The room was small but bright, with a window overlooking Maplewood's charming downtown district. I could see people walking dogs, couples holding hands, life happening at a pace that didn't feel frantic or controlled. That evening, over Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine, Penelope and I talked until nearly midnight. I told her about the years of small humiliations, the gradual erosion of my confidence, the way I'd learned to make myself smaller and smaller until I'd nearly disappeared entirely. "You know what's funny?" I said, touching the bruise on my cheek. "I'm not even angry about the slap anymore. I'm really angry that it took me 22 years to find my backbone." Penelope smiled. "Better late than never. And besides, you were always strong, Rosalind. You just forgot for a while." The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of coffee brewing in an unfamiliar kitchen. For the first time in decades, no one expected me to have breakfast ready at a specific time or to follow anyone else's schedule. I made my own coffee, regular coffee, not the expensive blend Garrett preferred, and sat at Penelope's kitchen table, looking out at the busy street below. People were heading to work, starting their days, living their lives. I had no job, very little money of my own, and no clear plan for what came next. But I also had something I hadn't possessed in years: choice. For the first time since I was 23 years old, I could decide what to do with my day, my week, my life. My phone buzzed with another text from Garrett. This time, I didn't delete it immediately. It read, "Come home. We can work this out. Don't throw away everything we've built together." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back a single word: "No." Then I blocked his number and turned off my phone. Whatever came next, I was going to face it on my own terms. 3 weeks into my new life at Penelope's apartment, I was sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life from scratch at 45. The bruise on my face had faded to a yellowish shadow, but something deeper had healed, or maybe awakened during those quiet morning hours in Maplewood. I'd been sketching room layouts almost unconsciously while thinking, my hand moving across the paper in ways it hadn't for decades. Penelope found me there when she came down from her studio upstairs, surrounded by drawings of furniture arrangements and color schemes. "Rosalind," she said, picking up one of my sketches, "these are incredible. Look at this bathroom renovation concept. The way you've maximized the space while keeping it elegant. This is exactly what Mrs. Carmichael has been looking for." I looked up from my pad, confused. Mrs. Carmichael? She's been calling the studio for weeks, desperate to find someone to redesign her master suite. Her husband passed away 6 months ago, and she wants to completely transform the space, make it hers instead of theirs. I've been too swamped with the Henderson project to take her on, but maybe... Penelope's eyes lit up. "What if you met with her, as a freelance consultant working with my studio?" The suggestion terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. "Penelope, I haven't worked in over 20 years. I don't even have a portfolio or—" "You have something better," she interrupted. "You understand what it's like to need to reclaim your space, to make a fresh start. And your eye for design hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, it's gotten better." 2 days later, I found myself standing in Vivian Carmichael's colonial home in Oak Ridge Heights, wearing a navy blazer I'd borrowed from Penelope and carrying a leather portfolio filled with my sketches. Mrs. Carmichael was a petite woman in her 70s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "She tells me you specialize in transformational spaces," she said as we walked through her house. "Spaces that need to tell a new story." When we reached the master bedroom, I understood immediately what she meant. It was a beautiful room, but every detail spoke of a couple's life together. His reading chair by the window, her vanity facing his side of the bed, artwork they'd chosen together on their honeymoon in Tuscany. "I loved him dearly," she said quietly, "but I can't heal in a shrine to our marriage. I need this to be my sanctuary now, my space to figure out who Vivian is when she's not half of Harold and Vivian." I spent 2 hours with her, sketching ideas, listening to her stories, understanding not just what she wanted, but who she wanted to become in this space. By the time I left, I had a clear vision and, miraculously, my first client. The transformation of Vivian's bedroom took 6 weeks. Working with local contractors Penelope recommended, we created a retreat that was feminine without being fussy, sophisticated without being cold. We kept one piece from her married life, a painting Harold had given her for their 20th anniversary, but reframed it and moved it to a place where it sparked joy rather than grief. The day we finished, Vivian cried when she saw the results. She said, "It's exactly what I needed. You understand what it means to start over." She paid me $3,000, the most money I'd ever earned that was truly mine, and immediately referred me to 2 of her friends who were going through divorces of their own. Word spread through Maplewood and the surrounding communities faster than I had expected. Apparently, there was a significant market for what I'd accidentally discovered I was good at: helping women redesign their lives along with their living spaces. Within 3 months, I had a waiting list of clients and had earned enough to rent my own small apartment above a bakery in downtown Maplewood.
My new place was tiny compared to the house in Willowbrook Heights. Just 800 square feet with creaky hardwood floors and windows that didn't quite seal properly. But it was mine. I'd chosen the paint colors, the furniture, even the coffee maker. Every morning, I woke up surrounded by my own choices, and the feeling was intoxicating.
Garrett had been calling Penelope's studio, trying to reach me, leaving increasingly desperate messages. His law firm had apparently suffered some embarrassment after word spread about the birthday party incident. Several clients had made quiet inquiries about switching firms, uncomfortable with his behavior. I finally agreed to meet him for lunch at a neutral restaurant in Millbrook, halfway between our old life and my new one. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. "Rosalind, you look—" He paused, studying my face. I was wearing a coral-colored wrap dress I'd bought with my own money, my hair styled in a way that actually flattered me instead of just being appropriate. "You look different." "I am different," I said simply. He tried charm first, then guilt, then threats about the divorce settlement. But sitting across from him in that restaurant, I realized something remarkable. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Not his anger, not his disappointment, not even his power to make my life difficult. "I've hired Rebecca Matthews as my divorce attorney," I told him calmly. Rebecca Matthews was known for being fierce in representing women's interests. Vivian Carmichael had recommended her. Garrett's face went pale. "Rebecca Matthews? Rosalind, she's going to poison you against me, fill your head with, she is going to help me get what I deserve," I interrupted. "Half of everything we built together, including the retirement accounts you thought I didn't know about." I'd done my homework. During those quiet weeks at Penelope's, I gathered financial documents, made copies, discovered assets I hadn't even known we had. 22 years of being the domestic manager had taught me where everything was kept. 6 months after that birthday party slap, I signed the divorce papers in Rebecca's office. Garrett had agreed to a settlement that gave me half of our assets plus alimony for 5 years, enough to ensure my business could grow without the pressure of immediate financial desperation. But the most satisfying moment came a week later when I received a call from the Willowbrook Heights Country Club. Apparently, there'd been some concerns raised by members about Garrett's continued membership following certain incidents that reflected poorly on the club's values. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in rejoining as a single member. I politely declined. I had no interest in returning to a world where women were valued primarily as accessories to their husband's success. Instead, I was building something entirely new. My design consultancy, Sanctuary Spaces, was booked solid through the end of the year. I'd been featured in Maplewood Living magazine as one of the area's emerging entrepreneurs to watch. Most importantly, I was helping other women create homes that reflected who they truly were, not who they thought they should be. The woman who'd stood silent while her husband dismissed her dreams was gone. In her place was someone I was still getting to know. Someone braver, stronger, and infinitely more interesting than I'd ever imagined I could be.
3 years ago, I began, my voice steady and clear. I was a different person, living a different life. I thought my value came from how well I served others, how little space I took up, how perfectly I could disappear into someone else's vision of who I should be. I looked directly at Garrett as I spoke the next words. It took a moment of shocking clarity, a moment when someone's true character was revealed in the worst possible way, for me to realize that I had been collaborating in my own diminishment for decades. The room was completely silent. I could feel the weight of every person's attention, particularly the women who'd heard whispered versions of my story through the professional networks we'd all built. Sanctuary Spaces exists because I learned something crucial. Our physical environment shapes our internal reality. When you live in a space that reflects someone else's taste, someone else's priorities, someone else's vision of who you should be, you begin to forget who you actually are. I gestured toward the slideshow playing behind me, before and after photos of the transformations we had completed. Not just rooms, but lives. Women who'd gone from hiding in corners of their own homes to claiming every square foot as their own. But this work isn't really about furniture or paint colors or window treatments.
It's about helping women remember that they deserve to take up space. They deserve to have preferences, to make choices, to surround themselves with beauty that speaks to their souls rather than someone else's expectations. After the ceremony, dozens of people approached me with congratulations, business cards, and stories of their own transformations. But the conversation that meant the most came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Pemberton, a young woman in her 20s, approached nervously. "I'm Sarah Henderson. My dad was one of your ex-husband's colleagues. I was at your birthday party that night." I remembered her, fresh out of college, working as an intern at Garrett's firm, standing frozen with horror when he slapped me. "I just wanted to thank you," she continued. "Watching what you did that night, how you stood up for yourself, it changed something in me. I had been dating this guy who treated me terribly, always putting me down, making me feel like I was lucky he tolerated me. After seeing your courage, I found mine. I broke up with him 2 weeks later." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of a bright, cheerful apartment. "I hired one of your designers last year to help me create my first real adult space. Not what some guy thought I should want, but what actually makes me happy. It's not much, but it's completely mine." That conversation crystallized something I'd been feeling, but hadn't articulated. The ripple effects of choosing courage over comfort, dignity over security. Every woman who found her voice changed the equation for other women, too. Every boundary drawn made it easier for the next person to draw theirs. 6 months later, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. The Willowbrook Heights Country Club was hosting a Women in Business luncheon and wanted me as their keynote speaker. The irony was delicious. The same organization that had quietly dropped Garrett from membership wanted to celebrate the woman he'd tried to silence. I accepted, partly out of curiosity, and partly because I'd learned that visibility matters. When successful women hide their stories, younger women don't learn that escape and transformation are possible. The day of the luncheon, I drove through Willowbrook Heights for the first time since leaving. The manicured lawns and perfect facades looked smaller than I remembered, like a movie set designed to look impressive from a distance, but lacking substance up close. My old house sat on Elmwood Drive, now sporting a "for sale" sign. Through the real estate listing, I'd learned that Garrett had been forced to sell it during the divorce settlement. The new owners had painted it a warm yellow instead of the sterile beige we'd chosen, or rather, that he'd chosen while I nodded in agreement. At the luncheon, I spoke to a room of women about the difference between success that comes from conforming to others' expectations and success that comes from honoring your authentic self. I talked about the courage it takes to leave a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels empty on the inside. Afterward, a woman in her 50s approached me with tears in her eyes. "My husband doesn't hit me, but he dismisses everything I say, every idea I have. I thought I was being too sensitive, asking for too much." "You're not asking for too much," I told her firmly. "You're asking for basic human respect, and that's not negotiable." As I drove home to my apartment above the bakery, which I'd chosen to keep, even after I could afford something larger, because I loved the smell of fresh bread and the sound of the town waking up each morning, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. That slap at my birthday party was meant to put me in my place, to remind me of my powerlessness. Instead, it became the catalyst for discovering power I didn't know I had. Garrett thought he was teaching me a lesson about respect and hierarchy. Instead, he accidentally taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that the moment you stop tolerating unacceptable behavior is the moment your real life begins.
I'd built something beautiful from the rubble of my humiliation. More importantly, I'd learned to build it in my own image, according to my own values, for my own satisfaction. At 47, I was finally living a life that belonged entirely to me. And every day, I helped other women discover that they could do the same. 2 incredible stories are waiting for you right below. If this one grabbed your attention, these next ones will too. Click to dive in.